4.6 million people, right? 3.2 million Singaporeans dishing out 8 or 9 gold is something amazing. A couple of golds and
Yeah.
a few silvers. This is
So
the
I
first
think
time that we
it's
saw
like,
so many medals.
yeah, that's been very, very good. So now back to the webinar. We're starting now. Very good evening from me, Charulata Bansal. Welcome to our webinar on demand-driven direct-to-consumer, or D2C as it is also known, supply chain, organized by Supply Chain Tribe and supported by Crest. To know more about what Crest does, you can visit getcrest.ai. D2C brands have made our lives very easy, from the basic to the very luxurious. Everything is available on a click and delivered at your door. In the last couple of years, these brands have also had a dream run. Let's learn from our panel of experts of what goes on behind the scenes for our package to get delivered at our door. So, with great pleasure, I welcome our panelists. With a huge round of applause, please welcome Mr. Anirban Lahiri, VP Supply Chain at Sleepy Owl Coffee. We have Mr. Hemant Kejriwal, VP Supply Chain and Operations at Sugar Cosmetics. Let's
Hi
welcome
guys.
Mr. Pradeep Bilava, Senior Director, Control Tower and Customer Experience at Zepto. And completing this panel, we have Mr. Rahul Vishwakarma, co-founder and CEO at Crest. The panel will be ably moderated by Mr. Sanjay Desai, Regional Director at Humana International Group based in Singapore. To make these 90 minutes more interactive, I would request the audience to keep writing their comments and asking questions in the comments section. And we will take this up during the discussion. At Celerity Supply Chain Tribe, we aim to be a one-point source by generating first-hand credible content on relevant business topics through multiple channels and media. So without further ado, I now invite Mr. Sanjay Desai to take forward the discussion. Over to you, Sanjay ji.
Thank you so much. Good evening and namaskar, everybody. Good afternoon as well. Thank you, Charu. Thank you, Celerity Supply Chain. This has always been a wonderful session to have a webinar, and we've been doing that consistently since last year, since 2020 April. And I would like to thank all the delegates who have always supported, and even today, with huge numbers of registrations and as well as your presence. Thank you so much. Welcome all my panel today, one of the best and one of the most youngest panels that I'll be leading. And I'm really looking forward to some of the best experiences that comes from their incredible knowledge, technological prowess, as well as their amazing supply chain experience. Thank you, everybody who have given your personal time to us. And thank you so much for dialing in. Direct to customers, right? This is not a monster. This was always there. This has always been there. There were some companies which were very much ahead, right? But in the last couple of years, D2C, as it is generally called, has been gaining traction. And the digital first brands are having a dream run in India. It is largely driven by tier one, tier two, and tier three cities, or what is called Bharat, right? Where all consumers are willing to experiment with the products. And according to Statistica by Ernst& Young and a few other consultants, by 2025, India will be a fashion and accessories due to market is expected to reach almost 100 billion by 2025. Today, it is at about 45 to 46 billion. And how do we do that? There is definitely some bit of a science as well as a lot of work that takes care in the front as well as in the back. And we have a wonderful panel today who is going to cover a rather back elements, front element, as well as the last mile elements to the customers. Let me welcome and introduce and ask our panel to introduce themselves, starting with Anirban. Over to you, Anirban.
Hey Sanjay. Hi Charu. Hi everyone. I am Anirban and I head Ops, Supply Chain and NPD at Sleepy Owl Coffee. I have 8+ years of experience spanning different organizations, different domains. Started manufacturing, logistics planning, network ops design, IT deployments, innovation management. My last stint was in Morocco, and I've been truly fortunate to get that experience. I think that's where my desire to do more of those 0 to 1 phases of any business unit, particularly with food, came across very strongly, and that's why I'm here at Sleepy Owl Coffee. The last 6 months Me and my team are really creating and strengthening the backbone to support all the growth engines that are there for Sleepy All Coffee, so that it continues to grow at the trajectory that we want it to grow. Right. That's all about me. A very short introduction. I hope to keep this, answer and keep sharing those knowledge and insights that I've gained across these years of experience with everyone and with everyone on the panel.
Thank you, Anirban, and I'm sure with Sleepy Owl, you'll make sure that none of our delegates will sleep. Thank you so much. Heyman, over to you.
Hi guys, I'm Hemant. Close to probably one of the oldest guys on this panel. So I have close to 20 years of experience in modern retail and supply chain. I think so. I spent close to 9 years with Future Group during its early years, from when it nobody knew it was Future Group to the time when it hit its peak. Did a lot of things over there, category management, buying, operations, retail operations, supply chain operations, big warehouse design. I think we were one of the first, probably the first guys to bring, put to life sortation systems to the country way back in 2011, 2012. Did a couple of startups of my own, made them profitable, was not able to scale them. One of my last startup was a logistics company where we serviced big clients like Marico and Hindustan Unilever. And last year, I joined Sugar to head supply chain for them. Sugar, as we all know, is a very fast-growing cosmetics company, darling with the young, bold, and the bold Indian working woman, and yeah, solving all the supply chain challenges and making it ready for the future.
Thank you so much, thank you so much, Heyman, and we'll be looking forward to some of the comments that you made. Over to you, Rahul.
Thanks, Sanjay. Hey, everyone. My name is Rahul, co-founder and CEO at Crest, where we are helping D2C brands in eliminating frequent stockouts by helping them automate inventory and purchase planning itself. I bring in years of experience of working and consulting with enterprise companies and hope to bring that change and discipline in the D2C ecosystem as well. Thank you so much, Sanjay, and looking forward to the discussion.
Thank you so much, Rahul. Quick introduction. Wonderful. Over to you, Pradeep.
Hi, good evening, everyone. I'm Pradeep, and I basically take care of the customer experience and control tower function at Zepto. And I joined Zepto pretty early, about a year already at Zepto now. Before I joined here, I was working with Flipkart, where I used to manage the city logistics, which is the non-large function supply chain operations there. And prior to Flipkart, I've worked about close to 8 years at Pepperfry, where I've managed almost all aspects of supply chain operations. And overall, it's been a great experience of being part of the e-commerce industry for about close to 10 years now. So looking forward to interacting with you all for this session. Excited to be here.
Thank you so much, Pradeep. Excellent. And guys, you can see we have coffee, we have sugar, we have a software, we have a last mile delivery, grocery delivery person as well. So we have everything for you to chill and relax. Take your coffee, take your sugar for the next 30 minutes. So let's roll the dice and let's get Rahul onto the screen. And Rahul, can you define for me from your perspective what is a D2C model?
So I feel the D2C model is basically where you have end-to-end control on the experience, on the entire customer experience itself. You don't have any middlemen, right, between you and your end consumer itself. Right? You're able to reach them directly, be it offline, be it online. Right? Traditionally, this has been there with fashion in the fashion industry, where you had companies like Levi's, Lee, and all, right, who were basically selling directly through their stores itself, right, and of course through multi-brand outlet as well. But in today's paradigm, right, it is also through company's own website as well, through their own branded pages as well.
First class. So, Rahul, three things that I could catch up quickly was end to end. Then you have your product agnostic as well, and then you need to reduce middlemen. So, just one kind of a corollary question: does it necessarily mean to be a consumer product, or even a B2B product also can be also can be delivered as or considered as D2C, and what environment that would be, or what kind of an example you would have for us?
It happens actually. See, sir, Mr. Sanjay, we are coming directly. I have a lot of oil and gas experience, and let me tell you, in that world, a lot of sales happen directly between companies itself. So companies will directly work with the drillers as well, and something even in the machinery segment as well. You have directly companies selling it as well, also via their own distributors as well. So yes, it is possible in all aspects.
Thank you so much. All right, let's get Anirban onto the screen, and Anirban, more from a omni-channel perspective. How do you define D2C?
I think I'll detail some of those finer points that Rahul made. In the traditional world, D2C always existed. We have gone to those outlets where the experience is dictated by the organization in itself. The experience of shopping there would range from having the right assortment, the availability, the great discounts. Obviously, it comes from an outlet that is owned by the organization, so there is a degree of consistency and quality in products and in communication, and also the people that you interact with. They are rightly top notch, right? In an omni-channel world, it's a when you are doing D2C, particularly for us, every address becomes that experience center for us, right? So whether the customer is shopping from Zepto or it is shopping from our own website, dictating and having the right degree of controls to right from availability, discounts, and the quality of the product, the quality of the communication, uh, rec- is part of those elements that helps you define D2C in an omni-channel world. So in a nutshell, it's still about reaching and acquiring your own customers and new customers as much directly as possible, with a significantly delivering superior experience across many touch points that the customer may interact with your product, or will come in touch with your product. So that's how I would define D2C in an omni-channel world. So for us, it's equally important that we do those bits right in a marketplace, whether it's Amazon, or in Q-commerce, whether it's Zepto, and the same application applies for any general trade and modern trade outlets.
Well said, Anirban. And keeping you onto the screen again for a second corollary kind of a question. You talked about a few things. You talked about control. You talked about end-to-end experience, which, by the way, Rahul also alluded to in the beginning. So then, coming back to the customer value proposition or the customer experience, is it the customer experience is more impressed by the last mile, what happens, or is it really an end-to-end experience? Because you talked about web interface, you talked about control, pricing, you talked about alerts also in a way, right, indirectly. So is it the whole interface, whole functional work that helps to get a final greater experience, or is it the D2C experience only resides in the last mile? How would you explain that?
Uh, the sum of these parts, I think, dictates the experience. But for sure, last mile plays a very, very big part in this. And I think, when as a product, since we are a more product focused organization, the last mile is the piece that can make or break your experiences. And today also, across India, no matter how much courier services you use, having a close monitoring
Yeah.
on it, having a degree of control that ensures that last mile is proper. For example, at Sleepy Owl, we choose that degree of experience. So while we are based out of Delhi NCR, we ensure that our Delhi NCR deliveries are done through our own set of riders that we have. And whenever the orders get placed, our riders go out and they ensure that the delivery, the comms, the way it is handed over in a package, the way they speak to those customers, those are the degree of control that we have put in our Delhi NCR ecosystem, right? So it is a part of the product, but also as you move the product across the different value chain, the last mile can actually break that experience. So having that control is absolutely necessary.
Absolutely. The last mile can actually break that wonderful work that we could have done in the front, right? With all the planning engines and allocations and pricing and availabilities. If the last mile does not follow through, you could actually break the whole experience. So that's a great comment. Let's talk about the structural part of it, because Anirban, because you actually touch base on the wholesome game, and bringing Hemant right onto the screen. Hemant, not just from a sugar perspective, not from a sugar cosmetics, but before a couple of, for example, future group that you had, how have you seen the D2 space evolving in the last maybe 5 to 6 years? And how do you see this playing out also in the future? Do you see some new trends coming in? And which would be those, if you have to mention one or two?
Hemant, you're on mute.
Yeah. Hemant, you're on mute.
Yeah, sorry. Yeah. So very interesting question. But yeah, pretty broad in its scope. Let me see if I can, just gaze into the crystal ball and see if I can make some interesting and observations, which I hope are not very risky, right? So, so to start with, let's divide the whole business into two parts, right? The product and distribution. Okay. Uh, D2C is what? Direct to customer, right? And I think the single most important thing that D2C has done is reduce the friction in, between product development and it reaching the market, right? पहले अगर आप सोचो, if we just rewind 20 years or 30 years, right, or even 10 years, it would take enormous. You would need to have tens of crores or hundreds of crores to even think of having a product, which is why you would have, these guys, so many product companies just exporting and becoming white label, doing private labels for international brands and stuff. D2C के बाद क्या हुआ है कि you are able to make a brand and put it up online and say कि वो बिकता है कि नहीं, right? It has reduced the friction. You can, पहले if you wanted to bring a product to the market, you would have to make tens of thousands of pieces, put them into the channel, give credit, give advertising budgets, marketing budgets, and do so much. It would require very deep pockets. Right now, you can make a few hundred pieces, put it out there, and see if it works or not, tweak it, tweak the pricing, tweak the packaging, which is great, right? Which has made so many great products possible to come to the market, right? But having said that, what has happened is कि अगर बैरियर टू एंट्री लो हो गया है, इट ऑल्सो मीन्स कि भीड़ बढ़ गई है, राइट? नाउ you have so many D2C companies and you have so many D2C companies that have so many products, precisely because the barrier to entry is low, because the friction is less, right? What that has done is कि अब भीड़ बढ़ गई और भीड़ बढ़ने लगी, right? So and I don't see this slowing down. I think भीड़ बहुत बढ़ने वाली है, right? Which is good for the consumer, but maybe not so great for a D2C company. So what does that do? According to me, it shifts the goalpost from a great product to great distribution, which effectively, the way I see it, and I'll give you some examples from our own experience at Sugar, right? So we started, so we started as a D2C brand, right? Now, almost 70% of our sale comes from offline sales. It does not happen online. It does not happen through an Amazon. It does not happen through our website and app. It happens through shoppers, through our counters at Shopper Stop, at Lifestyle, at Pantaloons, at the so many, we have hundreds of distributors that we have appointed across the country, right? So we are back to playing the same old traditional game. So the way I see this happening, and I don't know if I might be wrong, is the winners in this pure D2C play will end up standing out, will end up being able to convince, the investors to give them the money, to play them to play the game that where Bharat still shops, which is offline, right? So obviously it requires very deep pockets, it requires deep inventory, it requires humongous financial muscle to make so much, to push it into the market, to give credit, to have the organization on the field, to to support that sale, to replenish, to do all of that, right? So I think that's where the market is going now. And according to me, the biggest players will end up playing the hybrid or the omni-channel play. They will, so D2C alone will not satisfy their appetite. They will have to go offline, at least for the next 7 to 8 years, as I see it, right? So what does that mean? Does that mean does that mean कि सब सारी चीजें ऑनलाइन भी बिकेगी और सारी चीज ऑफलाइन भी बिकेगी? No, again no. From our experience, I have seen that there are some, talking about cosmetics, right? Even within cosmetics, we have products which sell only offline and which somehow customers don't buy online, right? And some ranges which sell very well online, लेकिन offline बिकती ही नहीं, right? And every channel has its strengths, right? So, for example, if we have some leftovers, if we have some, some a failed product which hasn't done very well and which we want to liquidate, and traditionally जब D2C नहीं था, it was very difficult to liquidate it in terms of revenue leakage. चैनल में कहाँ डालोगे, कैसे बिकेगा, वो नखरे करेगा, बंदा डिस्ट्रीब्यूटर बोलेगा नहीं मैं नहीं लूँगा, so on and so forth. Now you can just do a deep discount online and sell it off.
Yes.
Right. So I think every channel has its strengths and weaknesses, but so I don't know if I've answered your question, but I hope I've given you a gist of where we've come from, what's happening, and so my sense is offline. I think offline is here to stay for quite some time, and the biggest guys will end up playing offline. And I think the winners will emerge from the guys who can actually do the D2C, who can actually play the omni-channel game really, really well.
Okay. Well said. Well said. Two things that I picked up. One is friction is reduced and you need to move omni-channel. And then the second one was a fantastic piece. You said, shift the goalpost from a great product to great distribution. That means not just having a great product in the marketplace with the creativity or technology or advancement doesn't necessarily mean a greater experience in the market. Maybe from a usability, yes. From an overall customer experience, distribution is still the key. And as Anirban also pointed out earlier to another question, right, is that is exactly the sum game where you can actually break or make the whole experience in the last mile, right? So great product, moved to great distribution. Wonderful. First class. Let's get Pradeep onto the screen and then take all these 2, 3 questions together and said, what are those must-haves, Pradeep, you see in order to excel in a D2C model, and whether you have any 2 or 3 must-haves virtues that organization must bring onto the table. Over to you.
Okay, hi. Well, I think one of the key aspects for everybody is to be really be cognizant of the customer behavior or the consumer behavior, because in today's time especially you see a lot of shift happening, and like Hemant pointed out, being open to be an omni-channel, and I've got a previous experience, like when we were part of Pepperfry, right? It started as a pure play online selling furniture, right? And they continued for about a couple of years, and eventually they realized that there is a set of customers that would really want to touch and feel furniture before they buy, right? And that's when they expanded into actually physical stores, right? I think similar concept happened with IKEA, wherein they've changed their flagship model in India, wherein they're launching micro stores. So one of the key things is to understand how customer behaviors change. It could be basis geography and things like that. Like one of the things I vividly remember at Flipkart was that we had got a lot of traction from tier 2, tier 3 cities, and people used to love buying electronics specifically online. And what that meant for our distribution or supply chain was to ensure that even if it is the remotest area, and even if you would have to take more efforts to deliver those products, we would actually go ahead and take that path, right? And that really helped Flipkart during all the big billion days. Year on year, they just built on the serviceability part of it, as that if there are customers willing to buy, we should deliver, right? So I think that's one of the key aspects. The second part, I think distribution, that definitely plays one of the most important frameworks for the customers, and end to end, when we talk about what's available to sell, how soon it gets sold off, and how soon you're able to replenish, because I think one of the key aspects is, if you're able to do that in a very quick time, you're also able to deliver a lot of fresh products to customers, and be it any kind of inventory, not just, let's say, groceries or apparels, or let's say even furniture, but fresh products fundamentally mean a great experience to customers, right? The older your inventory gets, the there are complications that you're going to have from an experience point of view, right? So having a supply chain that cuts short a lot of lead time, a lot of middle time, and delivers a great last mile experience. I think, I would sum it up to these three things.
Excellent, Pradeep. Right, customer behavior changing, customers getting smarter, more technology on hand, more data on hand, and different expectations also, right, about cost, service, location, hygiene in terms of food products today. Customers are more worried about hygiene, where my product is made. And then second point was consistency and serviceability, right, two and three. So excellent. Let's get Anirban onto the screen. And then Anirban, I would like to come back to you from a balance, right? We talked about the last mile as the delivery as the sum game of it, and I would like you to bring on and talk about a bit of a balance into the entire end-to-end supply chain into and how does that those traditional capabilities will deliver a right D2C experience. Can you highlight a couple of those areas which will balance this very well, from the left side of
Yeah.
the value chain to the entire extreme right side of the value chain?
Sanjay, isn't supply chain all about balancing? I think your experience, our experience collectively has been all about balancing these elements together. But let me, before I answer that question, let me touch base on that, on a particular spectrum. Now, for a D2C brand that is operating on an omni-channel space, there are two ends of the spectrum. One end of the spectrum is being product experience focused. The other end is the customer experience focused. Now, typically brands like us at Sleepy Owl, you can't you as a D2C brand, we are stretched on both sides. You have to be product experienced really top notch, and at the same time customer experience really top notch. Now both of these are typically very different capabilities, and one end of the spectrum, let's say you have the Unilevers and the P&Gs of the world. The other end of the spectrum, you have Amazon, Flipkart, that are really customer experience focused, right? And this conundrum plays out every single day in my life, at least, and I'm sure this is across everyone. uh, we choose we are optimizing this as we move along, right? So but if I take 10 steps back, as an organization, as a D2C brand, there is always a true North Star. And that true North Star stems from, if we are building a brand, a product brand, it starts with the product in itself. It starts with the consistency and the capabilities that we want to build in-house for the product to deliver that kind of experience, right? That then brings me to that part of that supply chain that needs orchestration. So which part of that supply chain? The distribution leg of the supply chain would need a degree of orchestration, because then you have a lot of stakeholders that come in either as partners to your ecosystem, or you slowly build in those capabilities. So for example, if it's a sales ecosystem, so either you have distributors who are partnering with you, who take in stocks and distribute it across, or you have the logistics partners who do the picking, who do the first mile till the last mile of the deliveries. And then when it comes to D2C ecosystem, you have also the returns and the customer experience team. So these elements require a very close orchestration in the entire value chain, and it will continue to be so in an omni-channel world. One cannot, if you decide to be a customer experience on the other end of the spectrum, then you develop all those capabilities in-house. But for us, I think we know where our true North Star is, and that's being product first. Obviously, experience is there. It's almost close to being first, but it's always product first, because as a brand and as a product, we do service one need gap, and we continue to address that need gap for that particular individual, right? So that's how the orchestration gets defined. Now comes to the part where now, let's say as a brand, do I then leave the entire ecosystem to be entirely orchestrated? No, not really, not. In that ecosystem also, which needs orchestration, so whether it's 3PL logistics, whether it's distribution, whether it's having in-store experiences, you define the areas that needs and delivers that experience. So it all comes from that, from what I as a organization, as a brand, want to control that experience for. And that's precisely, you see Nike going direct, and you will see those retail stores, apart from the ones that you see in Myntra, apart from the ones that you see in other websites, right? So you define that degree of control, and what level of control that you would require in some in that particular spectrum. for us in within like I said before, for us the we chose that in Delhi NCR. We are a Delhi NCR based organization. For Delhi NCR, we will ensure all our deliveries are top notch. All the experience that goes out to the consumers are really, really top notch. So we take that burden, we take that effort, and we build that capability in house to do that day in, day out. So that's how we are trying to orchestrate portions of it as we scale along the journey.
Hmm. And anyone just staying on to the same track, a slightly different question to this is this the new knowledge that we have in the last 5 years because of communities and leaders like you who are startups, who are disruptors, who are different thinkers? Or is it because the supply chain fraternity, even in B2B, have realized this? Where is that mix, or where is the key that came from?
No, I think the B2B, I would rather resonate with the B2B piece. When I started out my journey, the Flipkart was just starting out, right? And over the
Yes.
10 years, you saw the fragmentation of supply chain going from 3-day, 4-day delivery, and 3-day, 4-day delivery tat used to be all right. I know, and during my college days, I used to order books and used to come 4 दिन 5 दिन में आ जाता, and that's all right. Nowadays you have 10-minute delivery, 15-minute delivery, 20 minutes. So the supply chain in itself has shifted. And as individuals, supply chain individuals, I have been a very close observer to this. Even B2B organizations, in my past organizations, Marico does take cognizance of how this supply chain is shifting, and how it plays out as a competitive advantage over others, right? What are you doing differently? Even in quarterly calls, what is it that is being done differently to deliver that kind of experience, right? So there has been facets. I think there has been some knowledge that has been taken from B2B, because B2B has traditionally existed, and then it has been sort of re-engineered and innovated upon as we have moved across the supply chain. So I think Zepto, Pradeep can maybe touch base on a lot of those topics, on how such has transpired across his journey, both in Flipkart and now currently in Zepto.
Excellent. Thank you so much. And let's
Yeah.
talk about the demand velocity part of it. And let's get Pradeep from a customer demand velocity or customer integration. How do you manage or shape that demand velocity for such a model? Is the forecasting efficiency becomes extremely prominent, or you have some kind of a leverage to play around?
Yeah, so I think when you start off and when you are pretty much new, right? I mean, you go on certain assumptions, right? But over a period of time, when you have customers coming in and you really see what's being sold online, what are the categories that you can experiment with, right? Your forecasting gets stronger and stronger, right? I mean, for last 1 year, one of the key things that have really changed at Zepto is the way we actually plan our inventory, our fill rates, our efficiencies around fill rate, right? Because the moment you understand what's the momentum on the app, right? What is that is driving those purchase patterns, right? There are times when for a quick commerce industry where you do delivery in 10 minutes, if let's say an inventory is not even available for let's say half an hour, there is actual sales that you're missing out on, right? And you also tend to, let's say for example, lose the customer recall then, because let's say if someone just came during that half an hour when you were let's say inverting a product which was not available, right? The customer may just feel, okay, it's not available here, and let's say I have to go somewhere else to buy it now, right? And eventually those instances are things where you start losing the customer. So I think one of the key things is absolutely a great forecasting, right? uh, and you do have your learning experiences around it. It can't start with let's say an amazing work on day one, right? But what you need to be at it is be really consistent. Also understand your design of experiments as to what you can let's say for example introduce as a category, or introduce a new line of product, and see what is actually being something that you can deliver to customers, right? So today I think one of the key things that our supply chain spends a real good time on is the planning aspect, right? And if we get that right, we know that it's gonna deliver the business that we want, and we're going to have a supply chain ready to do that.
Excellent, Pradeep. Right. Couple of things you talked about was inventory, and then the time aspect of it. Right. You talked about 20 minutes, half an hour. Anirban also alluded to that as well. Right. Which brings me, inventory is your cash working capital, right? Which is your asset management, and having a visibility of that asset management is very critical. So let's get Rahul to speak about it. Is what are those challenges associated, and how critical inventory visibility is from a D2C perspective, and whether it is really undervalued in a day-to-day operations or not.
So, so Mr. Sanjay, before I answer the inventory visibility piece, let me actually take your previous question that Pradeep answered, right? Especially in the importance of demand forecasting. This is something, sir, with years of experience that I've had in this particular domain of demand forecasting. I can come to a draw conclusion now that more than the demand forecasting, it's a balance between the forecast accuracy, the replenishment, and the inventory turn in itself. Right? How do you manage this thing? I feel study, for example, the way you are want to cut down the delivery times, right? More than, I mean, demand forecasting after a certain point, right, has diminishing returns, right? For example, even if you can go beyond 80% accuracy, right, you cannot really reduce or cut down on your safety stocks itself, right? So after a certain point of time, I don't think so. Demand forecast accuracy really adds a lot of value, right? However, and now bringing in the visibility point as well, the visibility along with creating your pipeline, right, making sure that every stage you have a running assembly line, if I have to say so, right, of supply chain, if you have to do for a same day versus a 10-minute 20-minute delivery, or even 2 days as well. You define your hierarchy of supply chain in a way where every step has its own buffer, every step has its own, including the pipeline as well, right? So that you are able to replenish time and again, right? It's the mix of, let's say, something that I guess us supply chain folks have studied and have been enamored with is the just in time. But there are some elements of goods, good pieces in just in time method of supply chain and agile supply chain as well, right? Where if we carefully identify, right, the inventory turn, the safety stock, and identify the right reorder point as well, be it fixed, be it variable schedule as well, right? If you have find the right this thing and have the right stakeholders between, right, I think achieving a serviceability of 90% plus, even for example with a model of, let's say, 10-minute 20-minute same day across, let's say, hundreds of different pin code, is something that can be achieved seamlessly and is also very sustainable in nature. This is something that, and I just want to also highlight an anecdote, right? Couple of companies that I have seen in the past where I've seen especially teams depending heavily on supply demand forecast accuracy, where teams want to kind of go beyond 95 98%. I've seen these teams really taking a very big risk, especially in the opportunity scenario. For example, you have a bigger event, right, and you have suddenly something happening which might disrupt your forecast accuracy. So that would be my point. Where inventory visibility makes sense, and where, for example, why this is needed versus managing, identifying the right KPIs at every level in the supply chain, and maintaining those KPIs and serviceability as well everywhere, rather than just at single and individual nodes in the supply chain.
Excellent, Rahul. I completely agree with you and resonate that comment about forecast being 70-75% accurate is amazingly good for organization. Beyond that, you really don't earn any value out of it because of the curve that goes down any which way, right? The 25% deviation you could still take and adjust in your supply chain by safety stock, cycle stock, your freight management module, hedging your ocean versus air, including some demand and supply pullback and pushback tactics. So wonderfully crafted kind of a visibility answer. And let's get Hemant onto the screen. And Hemant, we have gone through a few elements of it. We have seen some must-haves. We have talked about omni-channel model. We have talked about visibility and access management. Let's go back to the whole beginning theory between a conventional supply chain model, a traditional one, and D2C. How is that supply chain for D2C? Is it different from a traditional, and is it something new? What are the challenges that you are facing? Hemant, you're on mute.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Wonderful question. And, मतलब I can just go on and on about the differences between the two, right? So काफी फर्क है दोनों में. And, I think instead of giving, general, making general statements, I think it'll be best if I do this with the example of sugar cosmetics in mind, right? So what are the differences that I see for sugar cosmetics between our D2C play versus our B2B play, right? To start with, number one, right? Testers, right? So in the beauty business, right? Whether you're selling color cosmetic, whether you're selling lipsticks, eyeshadows, whether you're selling perfumes, राइट यू नीड टू इफ इन दी ऑनलाइन में तो आपको आप टेस्टर्स नहीं भेज सकते मतलब आपको टेस्ट नहीं कराना है कस्टमर को राइट you can tell all the stories with all the videos and photos you can have influencers make YouTube videos but you don't have to give testers out right which means that if I have about 500 SKUs that's what I service right the moment I go into B2B that becomes the 500 becomes 1,000 SKUs. Now at every retail point where I'm selling, I need to have not only the sellable product but also the tester, right? And I must always have the tester in stock because tester के बिना sellable बिक ही नहीं सकता, right? So that's one, right? Number two, another excellent example that I realized after having worked with the Hindustan Unilevers and then coming to sugar, right, was कि a D2C player invariably thinks of each product, right? They think even the product development team thinks of one piece at a time. It does not think of bulk shipments, right? Because they weren't born that way, right? I mean, you were born to ship, one product, two product. You might process 5,000 orders a day, 10,000 orders a day, but each box will carry that one lipstick or maybe max two pieces of that lipstick, right? Contrast that with a B2B, right? In order to a distributor, how will that be? It will be 50 pieces of this, 40 pieces of that, 120 pieces of this, right? Which means that so what I saw, and I'll just give an example, is so if I receive 120 pieces of an SKU का order आता है हमारे पास, तो in our warehouse we would just have thousands of pieces of this lipstick lying loose, and the picker would go and count 80 pieces or 100 pieces or 120 pieces, right? He would then bring it to the packing table, and then the packer would again count the same thing all over again to make sure that there wasn't a mistake, right? And then he would pack it at that table to, obviously he will not dump 500 pieces into one big box just like that. He will pack them into smaller boxes. Now contrast that with a Hindustan Unilever, for example. That is the complete opposite. वहां पर आपको एक पीस देखने ही नहीं मिलेगा warehouse में. Their entire system cannot handle single pieces. It handles only packed boxes, be it of 6, be it of 10, be it of 60, right? So a traditional supply chain handles only bulk. A pure D2C handles only eaches. But I think, like I mentioned earlier, the future is a combination of both. I think you will have to be ready for bulk, and you will have to handle the eaches, right? Another example that comes to my mind is multiple MRPs. In case of a D2C, you have one where you might have multiple warehouses in the maybe a North DC, maybe an South DC, maybe an East DC, but you don't really have a channel. You have your DC, which is under your control, and then you have the customer, right? Which means that if you end up, let's say prices go up, or you decide to drop prices for something, you can take that decision then and there, change the prices online, and you're done, right? वो कल आज प्राइस 799 था, कल से वो प्राइस 699 हो गया, and that's it, right? It doesn't work that way in B2B, right? You have a channel, you have distributors, you have so many touch points, you have thousands of touch points. वहाँ पर 799 का प्रोडक्ट आपका रखा हुआ है. आज आप अगर डिसाइड करोगे कि उसका प्राइस ड्रॉप करना है, यू कैन नॉट सडनली चेंज द पैकेजिंग, और या प्राइस बढ़ाना है, चलो ड्रॉप में तो आप फिर भी स्कीम चला लोगे, लेकिन 799 का 899 करना है तो कैसे करोगे, right? It's not possible, right? You have to have a, the system needs to build that I will bring in a new lot at a higher MRP, which will be tracked separately, which will be ordered separately. And these are things that I have seen companies not being prepared for or not even anticipating, right? Which creates, let me tell you, it just creates havoc in the supply chain. In fact, the bigger business, the bigger the havoc. If you're processing 500 orders a day, I'm talking about B2B orders. Imagine products going out with wrong MRPs, and then getting complaints, and then the next day the accounts team and everybody is flummoxed with 300 requests for issuing credit notes and debit notes because you sent out something with the wrong MRP, right? Lots of revenue leakage. I can go on and on, right? If I just so giving you let's take for example, if you allow me, right, I'll just give you one more example.
Quickly, sure.
Sales returns, right? So for all D2C players, sales returns are a part of life, right? Everybody knows that anywhere from 8 to 12% is kind of par for the course. इतने में आ रहा है तो nobody raises an eyebrow, रहते हैं हाँ इतना तो ये तो धंधा करने का cost है, right? Returns आते ही आते हैं, right? So for a D2C player, returns don't raise an eyebrows.
Yeah.
That is not the case with B2B, right? B2B में you don't get returns,
yes,
right? वहाँ पर you don't get returns unless the order, जिसमें order लेने में ही mistake हो गई थी या order fulfillment में genuinely mistake हो गई थी, right? D2C में तो कोई mistake होने की जरूरत नहीं है. You did everything right, but still the orders will come back, right? So I mean, and I can just probably give you 5 more examples, right? So
no, that's okay.
I think, so I hope I've made the point. The point is these are very different, so they're actually very different, and one has to, even the tech ecosystem right now is not ready to handle B2B. The tech system for D2C is pretty mature because of obvious reasons, but for players migrating from D2C to B2B and trying to become omnichannel, I know we have struggled because we are looking for SaaS solutions that we can adopt to use, and these SaaS solutions are not ready yet.
Well said, Hemant. Well said. Agree. Yeah. Excellent. Let's get talk about from a structure now. Move on to a kind of because Hemant brought in a point of agility and the traditional supply chain, right? And given an example of MRP, for example, may not have that agility. So getting Rahul onto the screen, right, and then moving over to a different supply chain model, more disruptive. As a startup, what are the couple of challenges do you foresee for a startup in a D2C delivery model? Because you need to be agile. You should have a supply chain model which will cater to unit rather than a box. Also be able to be quick and turn around things faster. So what do you think are the couple of challenges that a startup would have typically in a D2C delivery model?
So first of all, one of the bigger challenges that are there in with the companies is not having the right person accountable for a lot of these processes in itself, right? Of course, tech is needed, but tech along with people is also very much needed, especially until, let's say, 3 years or so ago. There weren't a lot of consumer focused startups that were propping up who wanted to grow very, very fast, right? But given how, for example, Mamaearth and Sugar kind of paved the way and kind of became inspiration for many such brands, right? And even, let's say, businesses which are importing and selling as well, right? One, you need to have a system in place which is tracking each and every, in today's day and time, which is tracking each and every step in my supply chain. Two, you need to also have a proper SNOP process. Of course, we cannot really adopt adopt the enterprise supply chain. For example, Hemant here was talking about Unilever, and even comes from Marico as well. I guess all of us at some point in our time, we have seen how these processes really play out in these large companies, where an S&OP cycle would really take you 40 days, 45 days to really finish off. A company, a D2C company which needs to be agile, right, cannot really follow something like this thing, right? So while having B2B, while having D2C, both of these in place, you also need to have accountability in place as well, right? So I understand that we cannot have a team of demand planners, we cannot have a team of for supply thing, demand thing, finance, manufacturing, procurement, but still, even having, let's say, a couple of steps in the middle, something that hasn't the requirement of which is something that hasn't been there, but something that needs to be there. I actually would like to, if Sanjay ji, you don't mind me asking this thing, right? But I'd like to kind of, being Hemant, being the most experienced amongst each of us, and Sugar growing very, very fast, would like to really understand how you, Hemant, really get this thing around. How do you make bring in the accountability part itself?
So, can you elaborate? Something.
I'll tell you what I want to. Yeah, no.
Yeah.
So, what I'd like to really ask you, Hemant, is how do you, for example, how do you track your entire supply chain and make sure that each and every step, right from, let's say, ordering your products from a vendor to, let's say, placing the inventory at a mother warehouse, and let's say having your GRNs or SRNs at child warehouses, working with 3PL as well, working with B2B partners, working with your own, let's say, at your own store as well. How do you, who in your entire supply chain is responsible, and how do you distribute that responsibility as well? These are some of those very let's say questions that companies don't understand. There is not a lot of literature either, and it is still work in progress. Anirban would agree with me here, and I guess we've had a long chat around this as well.
Yeah. So that's a good point. And Rahul, I want you to kind of speak to you on this, and as a follow-on question is, and you talked about SNOP, and you also made a couple of pertinent remarks about the long SNOP cycles, and then the magnitude of SNOP that needs to be covered in terms of the product strategies and new product introductions. From a D2C perspective and being agile and nimble, are you alluding to it that for a D2C environment, in order for a company to excel, SNOP is not the right process? Did I get it right? So I want to ask you that question. I'm putting you on a bit of a spot here, Rahul.
No, SNOP is needed. That is exactly where I'm coming. We can
Yes.
implement all sorts of tech here. We can implement all sorts of tech, right? But that tech will not really be of much use if the backbone isn't there to really take that forward or run it on an ongoing basis itself. Of course, you don't need the muscle and let's say strength of, let's say, a Unilever, but you still need some sort of backbone to handle that entire strength as well.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Excellent.
So
Excellent.
I'll just jump in and respond to
Go ahead.
Rahul, right?
Yeah.
So it's me, Rahul. So I'll tell you the short answer. So I don't think I actually have a long answer, because the answer is actually very short, right? Why, so we are deploying we are just deploying more people to maintain this rigor. So okay, let me put it this way. I think tech, so like you rightly said, right? Tech has a very big role to play on this, right? But having said that, tech alone does not solve anything. Ultimately, you need responsible people to run it and to take, monitor it and to use it properly. So, right now we are at a journey, we are at that point in our journey where we, started with the tech that, helped us grow. And now we've outgrown that tech. And therefore we are scrambling, and we are just over investing in, deploying more and more people to try and just maintain the hygiene, right? And I'm sure sooner or later, very soon we will have to, make that leap of faith and invest that huge amount in upgrading to a very mature, scalable, ERP and a transaction system, which will again help us, enforce a lot of hygiene, enforce a lot of discipline, and bring, help us do that better. Right now,
Yeah.
I would say it's very manual, it's very
Hmm.
human dependent, because the systems are
Yeah.
just not ready for it. We don't have the system for it. I mean, something just a couple of years back, the company was fighting for survival, right? To have made that, to have crossed that chasm, and now looking at massive growth. I think we just need to now. So we need to just invest in that technology now. Have I answered your question?
Excellent. Yes, excellent, Heman. Two
I
points you made was
I
uh,
I will also.
invest. Yeah.
Sorry, Sanjay.
Yes, good.
No, I,
Go ahead,
I
Anirban.
think, no, I think I totally resonate with what Hemant said. Is that supply chain does evolve over a period of time. We do need, currently at whatever stage sugar is and whatever stage sleepy oil is. The answer is bring in more people to drive bigger hygiene and rigor, and then as you scale up, find technology that can optimize some portion of it. But obviously, with the ecosystem growing wider and wider, the answer is always going to be people and tech. The second thing which I want to add on to what Rahul said is absolutely SNOP at whichever stage the company is. SNOP is an absolute process. Yes, the bigger organizations do have a longer cycle. For us, the cycle is actually smaller. The design whenever I am designing or whenever my team is running that SNOP, we run that SNOP in that keeping that piece in mind. Certain channel dynamics, D2C channel dynamics comes into play very early on, and therefore you try and predict what are the factors that drives those recurring predictability, and what are the factors that might have variability in the D2C forecasting. And the other channel follows the model that sort of fits into the channel dynamics piece of it. But yes, at the initial stages, as you currently build on more, as you build in rigor in SNOP, that forecasting piece becomes stronger. But the initial stages are obviously through inventory management and having, I think from my end, my experience, having a supplier or a reliable supplier who understands that variability and manages those variability at his end, and the partnership that you develop over that period, that helps, eases that variability that comes in month on month. So some months you have events that run that might shoot up your requirement, and you have an ecosystem of supply that understands this variability and able to react it at a much I think uh, faster, right, rather than having suppliers who have fixed scheduling and everything to drive more efficiencies in the supply chain. So that's the bit that I would like to add on to Hemant, that D2C and B2B capabilities are absolutely different. Like he mentioned, a D2C supply chain needs a degree of flexibility in their entire value chain, right from the supplier's ability to schedule and
Yeah.
reschedule requirements as and when it comes.
First class. And just to recap the three answers, right? And you guys have orchestrated so well. One is from the left hand side, do your supplier evaluations and supply consistency very well. Number two, fix your forecasting error as much as 75-80% accuracy. So that helps you. And then the third thing was invest in SNOP, which is appropriate with a lot of rigor, shorter life cycle. So bring these three things together very well in a harmony with having a technology to kind of overlay it will obviously give you a D2C kind of a performance that you want to achieve. Excellent answer, which actually dovetails into the answer for the next question, which Rahul, I'll come back to you a little later. Before that, I would like to go to Pradeep from a last mile delivery, because that is where we are heading to, right? Eventually, is how do we really balance the cost and the customer experience, right? Given that you need to do everything right into the entire value chain. Pradeep, over to you.
So I think one of the key aspects for any D2C is the last mile part, because that's also the moment of truth for their customers, right? And it also amounts to a significant cost in terms of the overall value chain. So I mean, the way we look at it is, when you are in an industry that is has got brutal competition, there is lot of challenges in terms of having that share of last mile team as you grow, right? The only thing that comes to solve is basically innovation in every way, right? So the first aspect is, let's say for example, if I were to talk about what Zepto looks forward to is things like optimized deliveries through, let's say, not just riders but through cyclists, right? Now that's something that we would really want to build on to, because that eventually saves the cost for the person doing the delivery too, right? And when he sees that value add, right, he would actually be able to deliver as well, right? So changing that mix of how you're delivering it, finding alternate delivery model is also something that we kind of really stressed on when we were at Flipkart. Like, we started to deliver not just through dedicated people at supply chain, but also exploring the kirana model, wherein we went ahead and asked kirana partners to tie up with Flipkart and do deliveries for their local areas, right? And that model turned out, it took time. It took about 2 to 3 years to scale it up to a level where it would be significantly contributing to lower costs in the overall value chain. But eventually, after 3 years, it was a great backbone for us to leverage on cost, right? Similarly, like today in India, let's say electric bikes or those things are just starting up. There is not too much of infrastructure which is available. People also don't have I mean, they would have traditional fossil fuel bikes versus a e-bike, right? And that could be expensive as well, what you generally get in market. Now, as a company, if you want to actually go ahead and leverage on all of those things, you also need to look at these innovative ways which will help you reduce costs. Correct. So
Hmm.
you really have to be innovative. You have to keep exploring. You would, let's say for example, when we do a delivery model, let's say if there is something that we can deliver by foot, then let's explore that option. Correct. If there is, let's say, something that we can deliver through a rickshaw, then let's explore that option, because those trial and errors are actually going to help you build what is going to last for a longer amount of time, right? And the earlier you find your learnings, the more you're able to, let's say, build on the model soon, and that's how you gain momentum on that, right? But if you're just going to focus, let's say, to reduce cost structurally in the same environment, that you may fail.
Excellent. Pradeep, some few great points that you made. One was basically be innovative. So think like a 7-year-old child. Generally, I call it being innovative. Explore new ways and fail fast, right? That's what we call today. And the third analogy
Yeah.
that generally I talk it about late quite a lot with students and MBAs and PhD students that I have is you have to now change the style. When in the olden days you say aim and shoot, today that aim and shoot is gone. Today the new methodology is shoot adjust, right? That is the way you achieve a result. Fantastic. That leads to a nice question, and then Rahul, I would like you to kind of climb on to this question again. Is how do you reduce, let me get that question again. How can companies optimize inventory management to reduce D2C supply chain variabilities? This question is from Ms. Prerna. Thank you so much, Prerna. Rahul, over to you.
Sure, absolutely, Mr. Sanjay. So, see, the entire beauty of doing inventory management lies between, of course, finding a right demand forecasting model, to then identifying what are my inefficiencies, what are my inaccuracies in my demand forecast, and then uh, try to compensate that with having the right safety stock, having the right reorder point in place itself, and then all of this is what constitutes my inventory turn itself. What is my growth projection? What is the SLA requirement that I have, right? Or availability requirement that I have. All of this combined is what actually reduces my supply chain variabilities, because the moment we try to either increase either of this thing or reduce either of that, right? Either increase demand forecast accuracy or reduce, let's say, safety stock itself, there'll be a lot of, I mean, basically we'll be trying to optimize for penny over a dollar itself, right? That's something that I've always seen happening. And moreover, again, especially when we talk about D2C itself, making sure that we are, rather than going with an ABC XYZ, which might be new for a lot of people, but rather than making it a standard rule based engine, right, for either safety stock, for either finding the right reorder point, it should be something that should be specific to, let's say, SKUs and location itself, right? and should also be something that should be reviewed on every cycle itself. Is that something that we are doing it right or not? So there should be an element of hit and try. There should be an element of forecasting as well that really constitutes a better inventory management module itself. Hope I've answered that question.
Well done, Rahul. Well done. And actually, that gives me
Sanjay ji, if you
another
allow me
question.
to add, yeah.
Sure,
Yeah.
sure. I'm coming to you.
So
So there is another
yeah,
question
sorry.
that Prerna has, and that is where I'm going to go and ask Hemant is, Hemant, can you just take what Rahul said further and say, do you have a case study for sugar cosmetics? Over to you.
So I'll tell you what, more than the case study, right? I mean, I just want to kind of re-emphasize some very, very basic principles, which very often, we tend to lose focus on, right? Inventory hai kya? What is inventory? According to me, what is inventory? Inventory is nothing but a hedge against stock out, right? Why do you keep inventory? Because you don't want to lose business. If we lived in a world where everything would be delivered to you next day, right? Why would you keep inventory, right? So
Yeah.
keeping that in mind, I mean, so one has to always optimize between the cost of a stock out, as I like to call it, cost of a stock out versus cost of overstocking. So if
Yeah.
you have so there is a cost attached to both,
Yes.
and if I have to give you again a very simplistic example, right? Let's say the cost of a sugar lipstick, right? Now, or maybe let me take a different example. Let's take a fashion t-shirt, right? Jisme, the cost of the the margins are as good as 70 to 80%. आप 200 रुपये में लेते हो, आप 200 रुपये में बनाते हो, आप 1000 रुपये में बेचते हो, राइट? उसमें if you go out of stock, right, then you are losing out a lot. 200 रुपए की चीज नहीं थी और आपका नुकसान 800 रुपए का हो गया,
Absolutely.
right? Contrast that with the cost of a stock out on a toothpaste,
Yeah.
right? अब टूथपेस्ट 25 रुपए का है या लेट से 50 रुपए का है, उसका आपका मैन्युफैक्चरिंग कॉस्ट या उसका लैंडेड कॉस्ट आपका है 40 रुपीज,
Yeah.
right? तो उसमें out of stock and therefore expiry and all of that, right? The cost. So very often, so out of stock is not a crime. I think whether you should be overstocked or whether you would rather have an out of stock depends upon what product you are dealing in,
First class.
and what, right? And I think that should determine. So we should not just go after so I think once we have that perspective, that business perspective in mind, then I think it simplifies a lot of decisions, and it helps you get it protects you from getting distracted with a lot of jargon and a lot of methodologies which are important, but then they come into force only once your primary business objectives are clear to you.
Excellent, Hemant. Excellent. And you actually answered one of the questions which came from Mr. Umesh Sharma. Thank you, Umesh. And the question is, D2C startups keep themselves floating by ensuring thanks, Akash, multiple and fast new launches. How they manage inventory of phased out, slow or non-moving? Is it not a big challenge for D2C supply chain? I suppose, Umesh, there is so much of a theory that we have spoken today, right? And then the three-pronged approach that between Hemant and Anirban that they had answered. One is on the left-hand side, make your supplier evaluations and audits and their consistency much better. You have your own SNOP processes, much sharper, much agile supply chain, much shorter cycles, right? Look at your product life cycles and then hedge your inventory. And then the third piece was improve your forecast accuracy to 75-80%, which Rahul talked about. Beyond that is no good. It does not help you. Manage safety stocks and cycle stocks in a way. Harness that with the ERP, which is top notch. You have the best solution as a D2C, as a startup company that you can offer to the customers. So your answer is there, Umesh, in each and every those three elements that we spoke about. But anyhow, thank you so much for asking a wonderful question. Let's move on to Anirban. And Anirban, we talked a lot about the front end of the supply chain. We talked about customers. We talked about asset management. Something that we haven't talked about is how do you account for the degree of the returns that are always there, and especially in a grocery environment, maybe in a consumer product, there are always damages, wrong shipments, wrong packagings. How do you really account for those that happens in a D2C ecosystems? How do you cause those? How do you maybe amortize those, or how do you replace them? Over to you, Anirban.
Okay. I think returns percentage in a D2C environment are a function of the categories that the brand typically operates. So, for example, in a clothing brand, you will see a returns that is far higher because the flirtatious nature of the product with the customer itself defines the degree of returns. Fortunately for us, we operate in a category that is much more planned. Coffee is a daily product. You have a cup of coffee in the morning or a cup of coffee in the evening. So there is a degree of consistency in consumption, and therefore that defines the kind of planned purchases that we have. And again, it defines the kind of returns that we get in our orders that we get on D2C. So fortunately for us, the returns has been historically low. Now, when it comes to accounting them as a percentage, we do look in. There are different tech, I would say, 3PLs and technologies that are out there that helps you assess pin code wise through that micro granularity in terms of the potential of high returns and the potential of the potential of no return. So there are in our current environment, we have largely three players. So we as a brand who are shipping it, there is the courier partner, and then there's the customer. In between them, the returns, the I think the returns percentage gets dictated at the very beginning of the very beginning of the shopper journey. So right from providing the right degree of reviews, the nudges that you provide during the checkout in terms of ensuring the right address quality, post purchase, once it goes out of your warehouse, ensuring the degree of coordination, the communication that goes to the customer as to when it is arriving, when can you expect that order, giving that flexibility to the customer in terms of rescheduling those orders, relaying back to the courier partners. If they need a change of address, also that is relayed back, so that you minimize that potential that might come across. There are, like I said before, there are technology solutions that we have deployed in our ecosystem that identifies customers and their behavior purchases past to understand our returns better. And we continue to use that through day in, day out to assess and also ensure that our returns consistently stay lower. Now, why is it necessary for us to do that? We as a food product are very much focused on the freshness of the product. For us, the food product, if it goes out and comes back, it often doesn't come back in the same shape. So usually it's all written off. So for us, deploying those technologies, smaller incremental improvements in return helps us a lot in ensuring the right quality product stays in the entire supply chain. Yeah.
Excellent, Anirban. And I like the way you narrated everything from the left hand side to the right in terms of the flow of that. Let us get to a slightly different topic in related to that, in relation to the service or the liquidity, because we talked a lot about asset management and inventories, including now the returns part of it. So get Rahul onto the screen. And Rahul, what are those primary liquidity levers, particularly in the light of the kind of a fund dryness, for example, or liquidity dryness, and how do you really achieve them with managing the inventory part of it, managing the asset management, the customer satisfaction, at the same time the sheer cash liquidity for the organization?
See, so one of these things, Mr. Sanjay, is definitely if it's not expired, and one thing that we need to a company needs to always track is also the age of the inventory as well. That is something that you track it, of course, with the tech in place, and also keeping your pipeline intact with it, right? So there are definitely new age solution where you can predict the slowness of the inventory or obsolescence of the inventory as well, right? Keeping a track on that is something that can at least prepare you 3 months, 4 months in advance itself, or let's say a couple of months in advance itself, right? Once you get that, is definitely then I guess I remember Hemant answering that question early on itself, where you can then go into deep discounting and then offer it through your D2C channels itself, right? That way you can definitely liquidate a majority of your stock which is going into obsolete. But I guess Hemant would be a much better person to kind of tell you, because he and again Anirban are the ones who handle it on a day-to-day basis.
Excellent. And Hemant, would you like to add it from a age
Sure.
and expiry perspective?
Sure. So, I'll take a slightly, I would say a more distant perspective, and I'll look at it from, right from product introduction to. So I'm saying I think the first and the most sensible thing to do is to not take very big blind bets, right? So, अगर आप एक product introduce कर रहे हो, तो why would you first of all introduce, go to the market, straight away place an order for 1 lakh pieces or, a million pieces or whatever, right? You would want to order the smallest batch possible, put it out there, check acceptance in terms of pricing, product, whether it's, quality, packaging, everything, right? So I think that's where the first job is that you mitigate your risk then and there. Once you know the product works and it resonates with the customer and you've gone to the market with it, right? Uske baad, I think just keep a close watch, right? If something, so I think there are no easy shortcuts. It's बहुत simple है. Always keep a tight watch on your on the sales velocity. If you think something is wrong, let's figure out what's wrong. If you think that the product is genuinely not working and you misread the market, right? Instead of waiting till, let's take, for example, the product shelf life is 24 months. Don't wait till the 21st or the 22nd month, right? Because by then it's already too late, right? When your product is 3 or 4 or 5 months old in the system, you already know you have a problem, right? And that's if you keep your eyes and ears open and you're looking at your data rigorously. If you're doing that, then you can start discounting it then and there. You can start coupling it with something else and bundling it and taking care of it. So the point is, if you are being vigilant, there is no reason why you should realize it, when everything is lost and where you have no option but to either give it away free or just dump the product into the gutter, right? So I think it's a very simple. I think this works, right? So I think there are no shortcuts there. You just need to be smart and do the normal business thing.
Excellent. Excellent. Very well said. And you brought in a few
I think,
elements there. Uh,
yeah, I
just
think very well said.
yeah. Yes, Anirban, go ahead.
Sort of, I will definitely agree here with Hemant. Wastage and expiry doesn't have an easy solution to it. I think this has been an age-old question to all supply chain folks on how do we, while forecast accuracy, everything, but wastage and expiry needs a very hawk eye to the inventory piece and ensuring that this is cash at the end of the day. So that degree of importance is carried all the way to the top and also across the breadth of the organization. Couple of things that we are doing to control this for food. It's almost 6 months of expiry. We have a shelf life of 6 months. So couple of things that we do in food is having, like I said, a supplier ecosystem that understands this challenge. So if you're packing with a co-packer, we understand, we work with their vendor partners or we introduce our own vendor partners who can supply them materials at a much shorter lead time, so they don't have to carry their own inventory, they don't have to take longer run batch sizes. Understanding, sit down with them, understand their challenges and constraint around batch scheduling, go back to the drawing board in terms of incorporating that into our product design in itself. And that's the piece that we keep on doing day in, day out in terms of all our new launches. We understand what are the elements that gives us that you need to incorporate in our product PNL in the design stage itself, so that the wastage and expiry down the line does get controlled. Having shorter batches, having shorter runs, having that supplier who is able to turn it around faster helps in controlling, but nothing defeats a Hawkeye in each of these stages. You need an individual or a team of individuals or a team of planners who is looking into this on a basis and a rigor that is driven right from there all the way to the top and all the way to the sideways, to understand and take this and ensure that it is liquidated at the right time.
Excellent. Very well said, Anirban. And we talked about the inventory as an asset. We talked about, Hemant brought in some good points about customer velocity. Anirban also talked about the near expiry and don't wait, right? Have a team or a policeman, right, in your organization. I would like to get Pradeep onto the screen and actually address these as well, along with one more question which is related is, with all that being said, how are you able to strike a balance between inventory level? Because we appear so much that we need to do so much now for inventory, right? Don't stock more, stock just a bit more, right? Just in case, not too much inventory, have your forecasting done well, and then your stock availability. How do you strike that balance, Pradeep? Over to you.
Sure. I think, this is one of the key things that happen at Zepto. We sell a lot of products that expire very soon. We are into fruits and vegetables as well, which, has a shelf life of 2 days, 3 days, right? I think, like Hemant mentioned, that A starts slow, right? I mean, when you are very confident that how much you're going to be able to sell, that's how you should stock inventory. But apart from that, there are also some key levers that can be leveraged, and we do that today, which is, let's say, how soon can you replenish, right? I mean, we typically started off with, having replenishments, let's say, once a day, right? And now we are actually, there are times when we are looking forward to replenish our stores every, let's say, about 10 to 12 hours, right? And there are some stores where we replenish sooner, right? So what happens is that if you build your relationships with your partners in such a way wherein you're able to leverage on the replenishment timelines, right, you also get more control over how much stock you're ordering, and, let's say, how confident you are that you would be able to replenish it in a faster way, and that kind of de-risks certain things for you, right? And changing MOQs, changing your replenishment cycles. One of the key things that, also is, probably a kind of adaptation to each industry is, let's say, like we also today have our own mother warehouses, right? So we also keep certain items which will have, let's say, slightly longer shelf life with us at MH, to ensure that our replenishment cycles are much faster, right? And then, obviously there's the tech part, which is you leverage a lot of tech to kind of give you early warning signals, and you take those liquidity actions right on time.
Well addressed, Pradeep. And your experience on the food clearly shows it here. Uh, Going back to the return part of it, right? And this is where I would like your knowledge to pick it a bit more is, do you see high returns in your experience of having done food, having done some other commodities in the past? Are the returns more prevalent in the food industry, grocery, or they are more prevalent in maybe non-food but more technology or luxury products? Is there something trend that we can put a finger, or there is not so much of a trend as you can say?
So I would talk more about, the Zepto example, right? I mean, we've got certain level of returns, and that's also due to, a lot
Yes.
of nature of the product, right? Let's say, for
Yes.
example, we get a batch of fresh produce today, right? Now, even let's say if the shelf life is 3 days, because of the nature of the product, there could be certain, let's say, bananas, for example, right? Certain
Yeah.
bananas may just ripe over today evening, they may not be at sellable condition tomorrow, correct?
Yeah.
And that will lead to wastage, because let's say either you do it, right, or let's say, unfortunately you happen to sell it to a customer, he's going to return it, correct? So that's why we spoke about, how soon you can replenish, because if your cycles are much faster, you're able to control these kind of damages. But let's say if you're going to pile up a lot of stock, it's also very difficult to have these visual cues, right?
Yes.
While we say that banana is going to be, good for 2 days, but not everything in that batch is going to be fresh for 2 days.
Excellent, excellent. And that brings me in another question here, and that kind of I'll go over to Heman. Right, such an appropriate example that Pradeep brought about banana, right? Such a intricate commodity, right? Perishable one. So, in order to be successful, Hemant, and if you are managing something like a perishable commodity, or maybe even food commodities, right? Does it mean that whether a self-managed supply chain model or a outsource model, do you have a better balance and where you have more control, self-managed or a completely outsourced supply chain model?
Actually, before that, I want to, kind of thank Pradeep for, I think he, so I said, that you don't necessarily have to always be in stock. Sometimes stockouts are good, right?
Yes.
And I think Pradeep, had a more relevant example than I had given, right? Matlab, you would rather be out of stock of a set of bananas that you will have to throw away tonight, and therefore lose money, than be in stock and then end up. So I'm saying, अगर सही चीज नहीं है, सही shelf life नहीं है, तो you are not going to make money on it, right? Even though you are in
Sure.
stock. So yeah, coming to your question, Sanjay ji, about the balance between a self-managed versus outsourced, right?
Yeah.
So okay, I think let me so let's just go back and okay, let's just think what are the options available to us on the table, right? So let's just take a minute to spell that out. See, so let's start with the simplest of all, right? कि भाई नहीं, मेरा ही supply chain है, मैं ही run करूँगा. I will build my infrastructure. I will have my team, and I will do everything myself, right? That is option one. Option two, right? My warehouse, I will set up the infra, but I will let somebody else run it because I don't want the headache of running it, right? Option three, right? I outsource the infrastructure. I said, nahi, yaar, I don't have the capital or the, I don't want to invest. The infrastructure is capital intensive. I don't want to, do it. And therefore, I, let somebody else run the infrastructure as well as the team, right? So these are the options, right? Pura ghar mein, pura bahar, and something in between, right? According to me, first of all, so there is no one right solution out there, right? It all depends upon the stage where you are in your life. At an early stage of of a company where uncertainty is high, you're not sure, you've not product market fit hua nahi hai, right? The last thing you want to do is invest in something that does not, that's something that you can fix later. At that stage, it makes sense to completely outsource, right? But having said that, once you found product market fit and you are scaling, I think it goes back to the fundamental business strategy ki bhai, ultimately you want to differentiate yourself in the market, right? So if you are, and you have to use, as Anirban had mentioned, right? You have to you have to use every lever to differentiate yourself, be it the product, be it the last mile delivery, be it, the customer support experience, everything. One bad experience and you can lose it, right? So, so at that stage, जब आप scale कर रहे हो, it's very important to, start bringing those competencies in-house and start building those differentiators in-house. Because just imagine, right? If a 3PL guy obviously wants 200 customers, he wants to sell to every customer, he wants to, because uska dhanda hi volume ka hai, right? He wants to be able to service all of you so that he can bring his unit economics, improve his unit economics. By continuing to completely outsource your operation, you are by default letting the 3PL guy learn from your experience, right? Which he is going to then leverage to go and sell to your competition for a higher margin and for a stronger position in the market, right?
Excellent.
So so according to me, I mean, having said that, so according to me, I think my favorite arrangement is do not put money in the infra, let somebody else run do the infra, but keep the control the innovation, right? The critical competencies, the critical differentiators for your customers, invest in those and keep those in-house, even if it means more work, more investments, more whatever. That is your sustainable competitive advantage, and you can never and you should never outsource it.
Excellent, Hemant. Excellent. I like the opinion. Wonderful. So, last question for today, guys. Such an amazing job today. We have talked about almost everything from the left hand side to the right hand side on an operational level. What we need to do for D2C, how we can do it better, what are the challenges. The last question I want to bring Anirban onto the screen, which is a slightly different question, Anirban, completely, is a bit of a reverse way, is how effective is D2C over traditional supply chain model if you have to build your brand quickly and without much friction? We talked about friction, we talked about agility. So would that really help from the other side, right, of the curve?
I think the fundamentals for building a product or the brand in itself remains irrespective of any channel. However, with this D2C element, it does allow you to test your hypothesis very early on. And
Yes.
with D2C, you have the early adopters in place. So you can continue to experiment with your product proposition, iterate during the entire life cycle, and then launch it in your offline channels to see and validate those tractions. So it's always a series of small jumps that leads to a bigger jump, and that helps us. I think that's where it helps. The second piece in terms of the brand building is that this particular channel allows a two-way conversations to happen between us and the consumers and consumers to us, and oftentimes we get feedback from our consumers that are addressed in the most relevant fashion that is possible, and not just we'll get back to you. If we do say that, we definitely get back to them. So having that two-way conversation opens up in terms of ensuring consistency in product quality, consistency in ensuring the narratives are in place, ensuring the consistency that the customer understands the price value spectrum that we are providing, and you do that day in day out. That reinforces that belief. For example, for us, what Sleepy Owl stands for, and for us that means simply great coffee. So it means if that agar wo experience kahin pe kharab ho jata hai, reinforcing that and ensuring I do take every step that is possible to ensure that they do have a simply great coffee at whatever time and need that they might have. So internally also, we look, all our discussions and debates are through this lens: consistency in whichever channel that we operate. I think that builds the brand. Brand building does take a longer horizon and a longer time.
Exactly. So, Anirban, in a way, what you said is if you do the right things into the entire value chain, brand building becomes an outcome and not an objective. Is that right?
Yeah.
Excellent. Fantastic, guys. And I would like to thank, we close here before I close and hand it over to Charulata back. A few thanks to all of you guys. I mean, Anirban, Pradeep, Rahul, and Hemant, such an amazing job. Fast and furious day today. Few questions and comments from the delegates. And I would like to thank Ramya, Aparna, Soma, Umesh, and David, and Mr. Sven. Thank you so much for being really with us today. It has been an absolute honor to lead this particular webinar. I enjoyed as much as asking questions and hearing to all the brand answers from the brand ambassadors. Thank you so much, Celerity and Charu. Over to you, Charu. Back to you. Charu, you're on mute.
Yeah, thank you, Sanjay ji. I didn't realize, in fact, when I saw that you would be asking Anirban the last question, I looked at the clock and it was already 7, and I'm like, where did the time go? So this discussion was extremely enjoyable, very interactive, very insightful, interesting. A lot of thought processes came out, and different opinions of how different things can get managed. So I would like to appreciate the panelists where they have excellently explained that while D2C may sound glamorous, after all, you're dealing with directly with the consumers, but there is a huge amount of planning which kind of needs to go on behind the curtains. Thank you, Crest, for supporting us in making this webinar a reality. For the audience, we thank the audience who asked the right questions and got the panelists to share some more of their knowledge and experience. And we hope that we've been able to share something useful to you. The video will continue to be available on our page on LinkedIn and YouTube. And this webinar will also be published in our upcoming magazine, the Supply Chain Tribe issue of September. We will share the digital copy on LinkedIn as well as sending it via email. So continue to follow our page, Celerity Supply Chain Tribe, on LinkedIn for all updates. Thank you all and have a great evening ahead. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Great job. Bye-bye. Cheers.
Thanks a lot, guys.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. Thanks a lot.
Thanks a lot. Thanks. Thanks, Hemant.